Thanks for tuning in to the Strong Kind podcast. This episode is with Austin Jochum. Austin is a coach. He is a YouTuber. Super interesting guy. He's had an interesting journey. We got deep on this one. Really enjoyed talking with Austin. I'm excited to see what he continues to do. And let me know how this episode hit you. Thanks for listening. You can also find it on YouTube. And appreciate you. All right, Austin. So why are you still single? That's my first opening question. Are you single? I perceive you to be single.
I was gonna say, what's the perception of being single there? Where's that come from, man?
No, because you're out there hitting dingers on the weekends. I just see this man who's not tied down. So is that just because you're living free? You're 27, and why
Well,
not?
that yeah, the hitting dingers doesn't help. When you spend 3 to 4 hours a day practicing slow pitch softball, a sport that females respectively do not respect as they shouldn't. Yeah, you don't get to see a lot of females in that kind of sector, so you kind of got to find them in a different light. Yeah, so 6 hours. So yesterday, I'm gonna tell you my day yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I woke up, I had a gym session 6 to 8. Then I had my buddies come in and we played ultimate from like 8. We were supposed to lift and make content. We didn't. We played ultimate from like 8 to noon, like just fucking around there. Then we had a sauna session, which was the first time we saw a female all day. And then I got roped into, well, I played softball after that, and then I got roped into an ultimate like flag football league. I'm like, there's just dudes everywhere. So that's kind of the answer right there.
I'm married. I love my wife. I'm very grateful for finding her. But dude, keep rocking it and having fun playing Ultimate Frisbee. I don't know what's better. I'm trying to get back to your level. So, all right. So I've followed you for a while, and like, oh man, dude, when you speak, so I'm a physio. I don't know if you know, I'm a physical therapist by background, but I also I don't. What you talk about, like your journey, is the exact journey that I don't want people to like go through. But also, your journey is super interesting, and you just kind of realize like, oh, like a lot of this stuff's bullshit. So like give me kind of your abbreviated journey, and then like what you're trying to do now or what you think now, and how it shaped you.
Yeah, there's like 17 different pathways on the journey part of it, but probably the most specific for the PT world was the disc herniation.
Mhm.
And that was where high school just squatting, we were lifting like freaking meatheads the whole time, bro. Like I was sending like max squats, clean and jerks and bench like 3 to 4 times a week. And when I say max, I mean like RPE 11 until the next person broke. And we just had this group of 3 to 4 dudes that were all just beefcakes, just sending weights in the weight room. And herniated disc basically was told by a chiro that like first a doctor, then a chiro that like you'll never lift again. Like don't squat, don't deadlift, don't do all of these things. And it just never really sat right with me because I was looking at my grandpa who's like 60, 70, who's just doing all of these things and was total savage and like was jumping out of airplanes in Vietnam, like was a paratrooper, like just a freaking savage. I'm like, if that dude can survive all of that, I can't even survive like a barbell. Like what are we talking about here? But really went through the journey of getting out of that indoctrination process and seeing kind of the rabbit holes I myself fell into as a stubborn, like individualistic person that like naturally fights authority and saw the effect that authority can have on people, especially if they don't have the stubbornness that like I'm just naturally born into like an annoying family, like a family that like just rebels against things, rebel against things. And I know just so many compassionate people that are not like, and it's much better to be compassionate for sure. And like just listen and be able to trust other people. And I found myself falling for these appeal to authority traps as this like rebellious type person. And I really just started to see people around me that don't have that and just completely like a doctor will tell them something, somebody on Instagram will tell them something, knees over toes will tell them something, and it becomes a neurotic kind of like pathway where you get stuck in this thought process of like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're told you can't do things, so you stop doing things, then you actually become unable to do things. But life and the demands of your sport don't change, and you're going to have to do these things. So
Mhm.
but now you're becoming actually unable to do these things because you don't train for them, your body's unprepared for them. You're demanded to do them. Whenever you get stuck in this position, you self-fulfill your prophecy because you're getting stuck in, let's say, a rounded back position that you haven't trained before. You hurt yourself again, and then you'd be like, well, I knew I shouldn't have done that because my doctor told me, rather than just preparing for life, preparing for the sport, and creating a little bit of a different self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm pretty passionate about getting athletes and just humans out of that neurotic kind of pathway. And I don't really think PTs and chiros understand the evil they do when they get neurotic athletes. And because I understand the aspect of looking at the small details and trying to help people. And that's where I believe it comes from. Um, but at some point you have to realize the damage you're doing with your words. And sometimes it takes a meathead like myself to just call out the bullshit through memes, regardless of if people attack me or not, um, to get people out of that thought process. And I have seen athletes and humans just completely change their lives simply by providing them the freedom of the philosophy of their body is capable. And from there, man, it's kind of game changing.
Dude, I'm 100% like, I'm not gonna like float your boat too much, but like hell yeah. And I think in life it's, you often need what you're not. Like I was very much a rule following kid and like kind of afraid to do stuff. And even my first exposure in the weight room, like dude, I was afraid. And like I got the self-fulfilling prophecy. I was like, you're weak, because I didn't know how to move, and nobody was there just like kind of showing me like, oh yeah, like okay, let's, if you suck squatting to this rope that's really low, you could just squat to a box. Like that's okay. You know, like just meet the person where they're at. Right. And like you're right. There's a lot of people who are super compassionate, kind of need to be told, right? But they need some fucking figure it out, right? And then there's people who are like, super rebellious that need a little bit of like self-compassion, or like we just need some more of that. And man, I think going through school, it's just, it's the classic like what you are, it's classic Pavlovianism, like where you go to school, you become more biased, you become like this fixer mentality, you also become this like keep people safe type of stuff, and there's no safety. Like life is going to come at you, right? So we might as well be prepared. So I love it. What got you, all right, was there any like turning moment where you're like, all right, I gotta, you said like your grandpa was an inspiration, but like where you stopped, like when did it click? Does that, you follow what I'm saying? Like when did it click that like, okay, I can figure this stuff out, and kind of the popular opinion is not what I should be following?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to touch on the thing that you were just talking about, and like the ability, like when you're going through the school, when you're getting all these biases, like that is the thing that drives me the most insane about our field is we will never look at our own ego. We will never ever look at the like we are doing this for our own good, for us to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
And we all do that. I do that, you do that, all the
100%.
coaches do it. But what most coaches, what most PTs, what most chiros refuse to do is they refuse to admit that, right? They refuse to admit the reason they want the magic hands is for themselves to feel special, to have a place. And we all have those intrinsic needs. Every single one of us, every single one of us, the reason we do what we do is to feel seen, feel heard, feel loved, all of these things, right? We need that. As humans, we need that. The more you reject that, the more you say, I am doing this for them. I am doing this because of that. No, man. No, you're not. And the more you do that, the more you create this fairy tale, and the ego grows inside of you. The more you reject the ego, the more it grows. And then you have these, and this is why it's so frustrating. You have people that like a knees over toes guy who gets like, everybody will be like, well, why are you harping on him? All he does is put out positive energy. All he does is put it. No, man, that is not, he's a millionaire off of selling shit to athletes and making them more neurotic. The amount of athletes that I know that have told me they didn't even think about knee pain until he started talking to them about knee pain. And now they have knee pain because they started thinking about it, or now they feel like they have to do a special movement. Like that's not for the athlete. And the more you say you're doing it for positive energy, and the more you say you're just putting out, no, man, you're lying. So that's one of the most frustrating things. I think all coaches, PTs, rehab guys, like whatever your role is, you have to start to understand, why are you doing it? You are doing it to feel seen, loved, and heard. You are doing it to make money. You are doing it to feel important. You are doing it to find your role on this earth. And we all are. That is okay to say that. Once you say that, now you can make it less like this weird thing that's running you in the background, and more just like, oh, this is why I'm making that decision. Can I wrap that decision up in something that is good for the athlete? So that's just one of my frustrating pieces with the strength conditioning world. It's like we virtue signal more than any other field in the world, but we reject the notion of virtue signaling. We will never admit that we virtue signal, and it drives me insane. It's so easy to point out just what is actually happening there. The light bulb moment with a lot of this stuff was probably the podcast for myself. just having on geniuses, man. Like I would have on geniuses and literally my heroes in the field. And every single time I brought on somebody like that, their answer was they don't have the answer. Every single time. Very rarely was it. And every time I brought on somebody that pretended to have the answer, you could smell the bullshit a mile away. Like I brought them on the podcast. I liked their Instagram page, whatever it was. Bring him on the podcast. I'm like, talk to him for 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. This dude, this dude's lying. Like he's straight up lying. And every single time they said they had the answer, I could feel that. So the people that I respected the most would come on. And that's not to say they don't have any answers, not to say they don't have any expertise, but the ultimate answer, the ultimate, like, I don't have the solution for everybody. That was a huge eye-opening moment because then I'm like, bro, I'm listening to some dude that told me something that met me for 10 minutes and I'm still listening to his words and he has no idea who I am. And all I did was just see that he had a degree on his wall. And I'm like, that guy has all the answers, right? And now I'm bringing on these super geniuses in the field that have actually like healed and cured thousands of people that are telling me they don't have the answers, right? So these people that have actually had results are telling me they don't have the answers. This person that really doesn't have that many results, just has a plaque, is telling me they have the answers. I'm like, I should probably listen to these people a little bit more. And after like 300 podcasts of those type of people, really started to re-ingrain that in my thought process and really trying to stay open and have the answers when you need to have the answers. But most of the time, you are in that pursuit of the truth rather than pretending like you have it and like safeguarding this fake truth that we pretend to have.
It's crazy because it's a lot like religion, right? Like, I mean, everything is kind of in humans is kind of like that, right? Like the people who are more open about, like, yeah, like, I don't know. I don't just want to say we don't have to get too deep down this rabbit hole, man, but it's the same thing.
Go there.
Like you go, you go to a church and like, this is the way, this is the truth. And like, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but like, I'm going to be a little bit, my sensor's going to be turned up a little bit when I go and I ask somebody who, like, they're not trying to force me into it, right? If they're trying to ask me questions, whether that be you're Buddhist, Christian, whatever, right? And it's the same thing. I'm 100% with you. Having the humility, oh man, it's so hard when people get a credential behind their name because their ego is so much built around that credential too. And also, dude, when you've paid $100,000 to go to school and you're like, well, what did I do? I had a pretty deep existential moment. Sorry, they're working on our deck, so there's just
Oh no,
hammering.
you're good.
But I had a pretty deeply existential moment, like a couple years after PT school, when it was like, man, I got this safe job. And don't get me wrong, the education was cool, but it's like any other education. You got to go and then test it, right? And see what's bullshit and what's not. And a lot of it is just caring about another person and trying to help them, right? And then also like allowing them to play, right? Which is one of the things I freaking love about your gym because it's just an adult playground. And so like what made you like how did you prove your concept or what made it work in your opinion?
Well, a couple things there. First off, people refuse to admit they're dumbasses. And this is like the craziest thing to me. Like, we are all dumbasses. We
Yeah.
are all dumbasses. And nobody wants to admit that ever. And it makes life so boring. And the reason I know it's so boring is because I've lived that life before. And
Yeah.
most of it, again, is like the more you, I mean, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, whatever you want to talk about, but it's like the more you really are set in a belief, the more you should question that belief.
Yeah.
Because the strongest beliefs I've ever had in my life were the dumbest beliefs I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And in some moments of your life, like, and this is why you have those beliefs. It's because you don't have enough self belief in yourself. You don't have enough data points. So that gets back to like, how do you proof of concept? Like, if you don't have data points to prove your competency in life, in your field, and whatever it is, just in like your day-to-day being of being comfortable with yourself, knowing you provide enough value for the people around you, knowing you're doing enough on this earth as a human being, knowing you're at least doing your best to do what you were put here to do. If you don't have those data points backing it up, you have to blind yourself because otherwise life gets like you can have this like existential crisis of like the nihilistic nothing matters, like I don't matter, anything like that. And I think how do you prove your concept? How do you do it? Like you go live it, man. You go live it. You go be it. You go do it. I was just talking about this on the YouTube yesterday, but it's like so many athletes just will like look at somebody that's farther ahead than them and be like, oh, like because I had an athlete tell me this is like, oh man, it was easy for you to become like whatever you became because you just love lifting. Like you're a dumbass, bro. I hated lifting. I hated lifting the same exact way you hated lifting.
Yeah.
All it did was just give me a hero's journey to go on. All it did was just give me a path to like simplify my life and go become something And in the process of becoming somebody worth becoming, I figured out what I wanted to do. It had nothing to do with my initial love for lifting, right? If anything, all it was just an ego stroke because I was good at lifting because I'm a bigger human being. Like, but that I think that's something that a lot of people get kind of mixed up and they don't really understand is you don't plot and plan what you're gonna do. You don't fucking network your way into figuring out what you want to do on this earth. You have to go do it. And through the process of doing it, you're going to fall into so many stupid rabbit holes and so many dumb things that you're doing. But you're also going to get a lot of data points to be like, oh, I'm really good at this aspect of my life. And I need to develop that skill set because I was given that skill set. Somebody, somewhere gave me that skill set. Go craft that skill set. But most people, they never find that skill set within themselves because they narrow their lens. They sit, they don't even narrow their lens. They sit and plot and plan and talk about all these things. It's like you're never gonna figure it out by plotting and planning. I had no idea what I was gonna do with my life until probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And then it really just clicked. But the only reason it clicked is because I was doing a bunch of other things. I was
Yeah.
actively working on crafts, regardless of if I love them or not. So
Yeah.
how do you figure out proof of concept, man? You go do it. Like
Yeah.
you actually go test it. You do the science of does this work? Is this
Yeah.
what I was put here to do? Is this my philosophy? Yes or no? Did it work? Yes or no? And then once you have years and years and years of those data points, life like it starts to figure it out. Like I go through pathways in life right now and I'm like, oh, this is exactly what this moment is because I have a data point to back it up. Oh,
Yep.
I'm on the right path right now. And I know that because I have this feeling before. I know this. I can trust my intuition. Nietzsche talked about that. Like if you don't have your intuition, if you're unable to trust your own intuition on things, it's because you have trained yourself not to trust it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing in people. Like right now, like I would talk about this with the YouTube and the podcast and stuff like that. I know, regardless of data points, regardless of like views on YouTube, I know YouTube's the future for me. And
Yeah.
you know why? Because I just feel it. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe it other than I feel it. And if you don't have those feelings, it's because you haven't lived enough life and you haven't trusted and put your nuts on the line to go feel things in life. And I really feel like that's a big part of it. Go on a hero's journey, go figure things out. And from there, you'll really start to understand what works for you and what doesn't. And that's going to be completely different from you. It's going to be completely different from me. It's going to be you. And that's once you get to that point, life is so freeing because then life becomes a video game because you're literally just living your life and trusting your own tuition and going on the like little side quests that you are giving throughout the day and throughout the week.
I'm grinning from ear to ear because there's like a bunch of shit that I just resonated. So I will say for me, I was afraid to make my own decisions probably until I was like 30 years old, right?
Yep.
And that's a big problem. Like I'm not, and it's nobody's fault, but like kind of my own, and just not trusting myself, right? And also trying to please other people. And you can be a really awesome person and not be worried about people pleasing, right? Which is it's hard for a lot of people because most people, and this is probably where your family, it sounds like, comes into play, is like you were conditioned to be like, like independent, right? Or a little bit of a contrarian. And I think that's a good thing to have. You just have to balance it out, right? The hero's journey is huge. And like honestly, dude, also people like you draw from everything. You quoted niche, right? You probably read like some weird Nassim Talib type bullshit economics that like, economists don't actually read because they're too afraid to, but it's like basically like this is all random, right? And so drawing from all those things, and then like the Stoics had it figured out. I mean, probably even before the Stoics, like basically your brain is a sponge, and learning to manage that thing is like the key. This was 2000 plus years ago, and they basically figured out neuroscience, and we're just trying to confirm it with like studies, right? So, but the biggest thing you said is I don't perceive you to be a giant guy, but how big are you?
Like 6'2", 230.
You are? Oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, man. I figured you were like 5'11", like
Bro,
kind of my
everybody,
size.
bro, every time I meet somebody, it's a good thing that it goes this way and not the other way because a lot of times you meet Instagram people and they're way smaller than you think.
Yeah.
Every time I meet somebody, they're like, wow, you're way bigger in person than I thought. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean, bro? What's my Instagram doing? Like, what am I doing to myself out there?
I mean, I'm 5'11", I'm like 210. So like I thought you were about the same size as me, but I mean, you're athletic. What sports did you play in college?
Football and track. I was a thrower in track and field.
Oh, nice. What position did you play in football?
Defensive line.
Oh, damn. How big were you when you played defensive line?
like 255.
Okay. Damn. All right. So yeah, like, dude, it's weird because like I figured you were like a receiver or something like that, which is
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
that's funny. All right. So like we can get into this type. Like, what are the things that when somebody comes to your gym or like what are the things that you can immediately okay, people are probably going to resonate it, but maybe like the questions people have because you're so different, right? Like you can feel yourself, maybe you don't attract people like this anyway, but like if somebody came to like Gold's Gym, they're like, "All right, I got to do this warm-up protocol. I got to do this exercise protocol, this type of thing." And they came into your space and there's like, "What the fuck is this place?" Like, do you have those moments or do people generally know what they're getting when they come to you? I guess is a better way to phrase it.
There's a lot of people that know what they're getting now just because Instagram does a great job of filtering. And I think that that's another whole separate rant. Like
Yeah.
you could curate a lot of your life if you just be yourself and stop selling bullshit to people.
Yeah.
Like, and it makes your own life, again, selfishly much better because you attract the people that believe in what you believe in. And from there, but we also have, I work with teams that don't like, I contract with a school or with something like that to where it's not, they're not individually buying me from Instagram. They are buying me from their coach. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different. Or even in the college setting, when I was a Division 3 and Division 1 coach, they were both the very similar thing. You have to get buy-in in a little bit different way than your Instagram because they're not individually coming to you. But all the time, man, we all the time we have those moments. And this is something I very much pride myself on is getting athletes out of that neurotic mindset and getting athletes out of like doing a rep. Like the biggest thing is like a new athlete will do a rep and they'll look to me like every time they'll do it and like daddy, did I do good? You know, like they're looking like it's like, bro, I don't fucking know. Like, how did it feel for you? What was that rep like for you? What did you learn from that like rep? And again, this is why it's so frustrating because coaches want the answer. As soon as an athlete looks to them, they are like, "Oh, I now have a purpose in this session because I can give the answer to the athlete." And what we never look at is just how much that is taking away from the athlete. How much could that athlete have learned if you just stopped holding their hand? And you can guide them a little bit and you can push them and you can like give them, but that's, I think the environment itself kind of does that if you just create a good environment. But so many times an athlete would just look to me and they'll ask questions like that. I'm like, I'm not answering that question. Like, what did it feel like to you? And once you get, and they get frustrated, a lot of times they will get frustrated, and that's okay, man. Like I'm comfortable enough within myself to be able to handle that frustration and treating the relationship like a relationship and not a coach athlete hierarchy where like I just need to be in charge. I don't care. You can get mad at me. You can get frustrated with me. That is how I know it's a relationship because we have ebbs and flows in it. And once you get an athlete to a point to where they stop getting frustrated and they start doing movements and they're like, "Oh, I felt this. What did you see?" And then we can have a conversation about it and then go back on data points. But I just feel like we have taken so much away from the athlete's individual movement practice and individual ability to understand what they got from that session or what they got from that rep or what they wanted to work on and what they wanted to get away from that session. And that's one of the things that I think our movement environments do a really nice job of is giving the control back to the athletes. And it's not like a sunshine and rainbows giving it control. Again, so many athletes will get super frustrated with that process because they've never not had their hand held. But there's a lot of evil in holding the athlete's hand the whole time. But once you take the training wheels off and they're just able to ride their bike, man, they get to ride their bike. And it's so much cooler to ride a bike than ride a bike with training wheels. And once they're riding the bike, man, like I went to Texas last week for a softball tournament. I had my athletes run all the sessions. 20 plus athletes, the athletes ran all the sessions. I gave them the workout. I wasn't at the gym. I gave them a key. Like, what other gym can just give the keys to the? Now, there was not a single coach there. Zero coaches, zero interns. Literally, the athletes ran the session. And it's because I took the training wheels off and I trust them to be able to do it. And I want them to be able to do that. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of coaches like if you can step out, what's your purpose as a coach? Like, and I think a lot of coaches struggle with that, like, okay, what's my role here? But your role is just to create that environment for them to take the training wheels off. And then when they want to show up, not that they need you, man, that's when you can get a lot of magic out of your sessions. The athlete should not need you. The athlete should not need you there, right? You just create the environment and then let them figure it out as you go. And again, you can be a guide, you can give them information, you can have conversations with them. But I just think a lot of times it becomes like the coach's kingdom rather than the coach's playground.
Dude, I love it. Well, I mean, and you think about, so the weight room is this like it really like it's no different than a sport. Like what basketball coach is gonna go on the onto the court during the game and be like, all right, do this with your arms and stuff. You have to get to that point where you trust your people enough to go play, right? And that's one of the hard things that like, oh man, it goes back to what we first started talking about. I think that's what almost when I first heard about you, and then I like went to your page, and then I like started just like I'm like dude's rolling with lightsabers and jumping through hoops, parkour, and I'm like, this is what I want. This is what a 35-year-old me who has no other major vices in life, just he wants to just go play sports. And like I don't want to drink and sit around and drink. I just want to play. Like I think this is also what a lot of like I'll just use it like a lot of people are missing in their life, and they turn to like the dark side of just like vice and other shit. If you just play more, you're gonna want to go play more, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about like the environment you've created, and just like yeah, man, it really all we're just I just always loop back to the same shit, so I apologize, but it's just suspend your ego. Like, I coach a lot of people, and like I'm trying to always balance the act of, and I used to not be like this. I used to try to make it easy and simple for people or make it perfect. And I'm like, you're gonna learn more by effing up within a little bit of a framework than me holding your hand throughout this whole training process. And rehab's the same way. Like if you the point of rehabbing is to know not that like you're never going to get injured again. It's that like when you get injured or when you have pain that you can get back to where you want to be, right? Like that should be the point. The point should almost to be like to see, dude, I slipped in my bathtub yesterday, or not in the bathtub, in the shower. I totally about like died, but I also like recovered in a way. I'm like, this is why I fucking train, because it like you just are prepared to do stuff like that. And it's almost why I've incorporated more of like some of the play stuff that you incorporate. I like Angus, I have Angus, I'm working with Angus Bradley right now, if you follow that guy.
Oh
Uh
yeah, Angus the goat.
dude, he's fucking hilarious. I mostly am working with him because he's funny. But yeah, it's just like create these environments that allow you to prosper. And that's what child rearing is. That's what being a parent, being a good parent looks like, right? Uh so I see these similarities. I don't really have a good
And
question off of that. You go. Yeah.
no, 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 yeah, and yeah, this is a good conversation piece there too, because it's like the number one thing you can get of an athlete, the number one thing you can get of an athlete is just trust in their own bodies.
Yeah.
And almost everything we do in strength conditioning, rehab, PT, chiro is taking trust away from their bodies and putting it within your philosophies, right? And that is such a darker evil than most people realize, because what that leads to is at 20, like, and I've seen kids at 15, 12, 15 years old where they're wearing knee braces and they're told, I can't do this, I can't do that. Like if we start that at 12 to 15, what's that look like at 20? And then what's that look like at 30? And what's that look like at 40 and 50 and 60, right? By the time they're 50, they're not going to be doing any movement. And that's so many people in that 30 to 50-year-old range, because they were told at 20 they needed to start limiting themselves. They told they were starting too old. They were told whatever, whatever. And again, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, but you take ownership away from their bodies, you take movement away from their bodies, you put rules on them, and they never learn to trust themselves. They never learn to trust what they are fully capable of. And it falls apart, man. Their bodies
Yeah.
fall apart. They stop moving. They stop enjoying. And they don't stop playing because they don't want to play. They stop playing because they were told they can't. They were
Yeah.
told they shouldn't. They were told to grow up, whatever it is. It's like,
Yeah.
who's telling you to grow up, man? Look at that person that's telling you. Do you want to live a life like that person? Fuck no, bro. Absolutely not. So I just feel like that's the number one thing you can give an athlete is just trust and faith back into their bodies. And then everything else we do is just secondhand. Because
Yeah.
then once an athlete feels capable, it's like, oh, I want to be able to do this. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go do that. And
Yeah.
so easy to coach then.
Dude, I worked in a so I wanted to be a doctor. So like dude, ultimate people pleaser guy right here for a long time. I was like I'm going to be well, the first thing I wanted to be was a Navy SEAL. I wanted to do the hardest thing I could, right? And then I'm like, fuck, I'm afraid of I'm afraid, which is bad, right? But also like I don't really have the temperament probably to do that type of job. But I'm like, okay, well, I'll be a doctor. And I went and I worked in a hospital. Thank God for my dad being like, dude, go work in a hospital for a few years, like see what you like. And I'm like, I look around and I'm like, this is not health. Like this doctor is not like healthy. He's miserable and he's just making executive decisions. And this is not every doctor. There were some cool doctors, there were some great guys. Like this, we use these blanket statements. But the environment that we create in the hospital is miserable. Everybody that I worked on a neurosurgery floor, dude. It was wild. Um, and it was just everybody's depressed. Like you're there, you're so afraid. You're afraid to move. You're afraid to live. And I think that's when it started to turn for me. It's like, all right, this is not what I want, right? I don't want to be a fixer because that's not what people are at all, right? Um, but it's just like you just see it, this environment that was created, and too many people's perception of health is still like, I gotta go. There's the amount of people who like think they gotta go get a physical, and I know it's because we put those damn waivers on stuff. It's like, go check with your doctor before you exercise. It's like, no, don't talk to that person at all. Rage against that, right? But it is the environment we've created where it's like, I gotta get clearance to do XYZ. And it's you're right. You do that to a 12-year-old kid, like, and nobody ever confronts it or helps them confront it throughout the rest of their life. Like they're broken by the time they're 30 years old. And then they go and they drink and feel like shit and wonder why, right?
Yeah,
No, nothing wrong with drinking, but having
but
a
no,
baby.
no, no, and then that's the thing though. That's why the virtue signal drives me insane because not only are we doing evil, we pretend like we're doing good when we're doing evil. Like that is the most frustrating part. If you're gonna go do evil, go do fucking evil. Go be a supervillain. Go make a bunch of money. Go be a corporate shill and go do it and just like say you're doing that. But like our field is the ultimate. We're doing that shit wrapping it up in, oh, we are such a good person because I helped them. You didn't help them. You didn't. Like, go look at what that looks like 20 years down the road. And I promise you, you did not help that athlete the way you think you did.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think it really is just like, how do I take it away from me and be a facilitator? I think the biggest fear, dude, don't you think the biggest fear is like, how do I make money if I'm not like in charge or I'm in control,
Yeah.
right?
How do you make money? How do you feel important? Again, like, but again, most people will not admit that's why they are doing it.
Yeah.
Then that's like again, that's why it's so important to just admit that. I coach, I have my Yoakum Strength business because I want to make money and I want to feel important, right? That is the number one reason I do it. That's the number one reason you do it. That's the number one reason every single person does it.
Yeah.
Is so it's not even money. Money is just a status thing to prove to yourself you have a role on this planet. Like, and we all need to have a role on this planet. Otherwise, you get nihilistic as fuck. If you don't have a role on this planet, that's when depression kicks in.
Yeah.
And it should, because it's like, why the fuck am I here? You don't have data points to prove why you're here. It's really hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I have the business. That's why I do everything I do. First and foremost. Now that I admit that, now that I understand I have a skill set here, now that I have data points, how can I wrap that up for a common good, for something that is better? And once you wrap it that way, your worth is not based on having all of the worth, because you start to understand people will stay pay you because they want to be with you. They don't need you. They just want to be with you. And people will pay a lot of money to want things. They want to be with people. They will also pay a lot of money to need people, but you don't need to sell the need. People think they need, like people think they need to sell the need. You don't need to sell the need. You can sell a want and make a lot of money and feel satisfied and feel like you have a role on this earth. And I promise once you get to that point, it feels like it's coming from a much better point, even though it sounds worse. It sounds worse to say you're doing it for money. It sounds worse to say you're doing it for status, but it's the truth. And once you admit that to yourself, it's so freeing. And then you don't have, again, I just feel like so many coaches have that run in the background. Like it's just running in the background. And when you don't admit those feelings, when you don't admit that, then you get this like almost like anger, resentment, because you'll never actually admit that. It's like, oh, I got this. I don't know what's going on. It's good.
Don't
Yeah,
you
you do. You just won't admit it.
don't you think like the people who like claim that they're not selfish after like they're they're saying that they're doing stuff for other people or XYZ, like I actually the reason this comes up because I just talked to a lady that like I'm trying to help her with some shoulder pain. I'm she's enrolled with me. We're working on her shoulder pain and a few other things, some health seeking behaviors, right? And she's like, I just put everybody first. And I'm like, does that make you happy? And she's like, well, like I like helping people. I'm like, yeah, but what you said is like you're not getting any of the things you want to do done, right? And she's afraid to be selfish when, like, honestly, dude, I am the best person for other people when I am selfish. Like when I
Absolutely.
am doing the shit that I like that makes me feel good. Cause then I go put that energy out into the world. But like we're so conditioned to be like, oh, that's wrong. Like, me doing what I'm doing, like even like how I operate my business is not how most people in physical therapy, that world operate their business. People are mad, not people are mad, but some people are mad that like I work for more of a cash based service. But in reality, it's the most straightforward transaction humans have is like just direct, hey, yeah, if I do a good job, you pay me money and you get the result, or I can help you as best possible.
Yep.
Right. But people get in their head about XYZ. And it's like, dude, and also like you at 27 just going out and hitting dingers, like, and you're having fun, you're putting out like your good juju into the world. Like I just trust that that's going to come back to you in good ways. Where a lot of people are so they don't trust that at all. They don't trust that where they're at will take them where they want to go if they just keep getting the, like you said, the data points,
Yeah,
right?
and they don't listen to that intuition. And again, I've been there. Softball was one thing that I was told like I don't know. And again, I don't know the end goal with what softball really is. I just know intuitively there is something there that when I do that, I'm the best version of myself. When I'm pursuing an art like that, I am the best version of myself for other people around me. But
Yeah.
because I have a desire to go do that. And there were so many times where I guilt tripped myself of like, oh, I could be doing something else. I could be. And every time I tried to go do something else that was more important for other people, bigger, I was a worse version of myself and my products sucked more. The results were worse, well, like payment wise, client wise. And as soon as I just like let go of all of that and I'm like, okay, I have a desire right now in this moment, and this could change tomorrow. I have the desire in this moment to fully pursue this task. And when I started doing that, I'm like, oh my God, everything's fucking clicking. And it's just because I just listened to myself. And again, tomorrow it could change. I could go want to be a doctor tomorrow. And when I have that intuition, but it's not forcing any of that. It's just listening. And when I have a intuitive thought, I'm like, okay, there's something there. I got to go pursue it to the max of my abilities until I no longer have that and then change. But most, again, that goes back to most people do not want to admit they're wrong or dumbasses or they just change. And I put this on a Q&A like 10 seconds before we hopped on this podcast, but it was like every 4 years of my life, it feels like I'm just totally a different person. Like it's
Yeah.
not even the same person. It's totally different chapter. And most people refuse to like change the chapter of who they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. That's the ship of Theseus, right? The ship that turned over, but it's like, is that right? Am I saying the right ship right there? Like, that's why I think it's important. I was a history major in undergrad, dude. This is why I feel like, and this like generalized education is really good. Yeah, object turns over because we are like, and if you're not updating, you're probably freaking miserable, right? Like, yeah, and it's also, dude, it's so funny too because and like you, Angus helped me with this. You helped me with this. Just in consuming your content and just like I just like the idea of roly rolls. But like, just be your authentic self. Like, and if you don't know who that is, well, then like start asking yourself who that is. Right. I think I saw you talking about sleeping on the floor, and you just when you go without you go within, right? Well, so start going without the stimuluses that are taking you where you want to go, right? Like, and that's another big thing I think I draw from you a lot. It's like,
Well, and I think it's really hard there too. And this is one of the things people don't understand is in one chapter of your life, this is what most people do. And I've done this before. And now one of the biggest skill sets is I have been able to shift this is you get to a point where you are a 7 out of 10 at things at that chapter in your life. And that's pretty good, man. That's
yeah,
better than most people at that skill set. And it gets you pretty far and it gets you good enough and it makes you enough money. And most people do not want to give up that 7 to go reach an 8, because to give up that 7 and reach that 8, you have to go back to a 3. And there's been so many times in social media, in my athletic career, in my business, whatever it is, where I totally just drop off of the 7 where I was good enough and I could just keep chopping wood in that 7 and banging my fucking head against the wall, being good enough, making just a like whatever, doing just enough. And I take a step back and I go to that 3 and I totally just shift kind of like gears into something different to evolve. But when you do that, everything takes a hit because now you're starting over. You're becoming a new beginner. And that period sucks because you were just up here and it was amazing. Everybody's telling you how good you were. And now you're going back down to something you suck at. But once you go back down to something you suck at, it allows that neurological growth, the neuroscience up there, where you can take
yeah,
that now 8, you can become that beginner again. You can make that new connection in your brain and become somebody new. And once you become that 8, man, that's so much better. But then when you become the 8, you have to evolve back down to the 3 and then go reach the 9. And I just think a lot of people like this is one thing I talk about. Like, I think like Joe Rogan used to be the host of Fear Factor, right? You could be the host of Fear Factor for a long time and just retire and just be good
yeah,
there. And man, you're making a lot of money and you're doing great at
yeah,
life, bro. and he totally like just threw that shit away, became podcast guy, right? You know,
Yeah.
like, and now it's such a higher level, but like most people don't realize they just see Rogan as who he is now.
Yeah.
They don't see Fear Factor Rogan. I watched a Fear Factor episode. It was terrible, bro. If that was the
Yeah.
final version of Rogan, humanity missed out on a lot of like what he could have become. And I think that's every single one of us. We are the Fear Factor like version of Rogan and Fear Factor version of ourselves.
We
And we
are the
haven't
Pat
become the
Sajak. You know who Pat Sajak is?
uh-uh.
The guy who hosts Wheel of Fortune, and he's been hosting it for like 40 years. He's miserable. Well, I don't know if he's miserable. He's probably got a lot of money, and but dude, I read this yesterday. It's like the people who are in Palm Springs golfing all the time, like they're not that happy. They just reached a certain level and then they just stayed there, right? Like growth is why we're here, right? And yeah, Pat Sajak, go check out Pat Sajak. He's been hosting it forever. But you're right, dude. Like Joe Rogan had the opportunity to just keep taking the easy path, like, right? Or at least the path that wasn't growth oriented, because it's not always going to be easy. And how I think about it, dude, is like, I just have seen this with more and more people too. Even how I talk about things, like I think there's the base building and then there's a peak, and to you got a base build and then you can peak, right? And I don't even want to use that like people are going to take that like, okay, it's going to be really like periodized way of doing that. I'm not saying that, but like general athleticness, right? Perform it, right? But then you got to do it again in a slightly different manner, like and then you just keep doing that, and that requires you to go back and like do shit. Like I see that you're doing a little bit more Olympic lifting. Like I don't know if like Olympic lifting's so technical. It's hard. I have a guy who's super freaking strong, and like I'm like, yeah, you should like think about maybe some Olympic lifts. And he did like 1 week of them and he sucked. And he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, all right, that's cool, but I think it would be beneficial. And that's neither here nor there, right? But like going back and becoming a beginner, like is crucial to enjoying life, I think. So
And becoming addicted to that feeling.
yeah,
That is when things really start to take off. And I think most people get addicted to being good enough and they hate failure, like you were saying. And now, like, the only thing that really gets me going right now is sucking at something. And I
yeah,
thoroughly enjoy that. And I only say that because I used to be deathly afraid of failure. Like, so much of my life was driven by just avoiding failure, not trying to succeed, and just trying to avoid sucking at something. And now it's the only thing that gets me going. And since that shift, everything has exponentially grown in my life.
yeah. I'm with you, dude. Hey, this has been fun. I will say as I get going on these things, because like this is the next iteration of me is doing more long form content, posting. Like it is, and it's fun. I enjoy it. It's also like I'm not very good at it. Like my visuals aren't gonna be very good. I'm gonna have to upgrade some shit. It's scary. But yeah, you just gotta keep evolving. No, I appreciate your time, dude. And I'm gonna make a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. We'll make a YouTube video together.
That'd be cool. Yeah, dude, I'm not that far away. So I'll figure out a time in the not too distant future and make it work. But dude, I appreciate you. I appreciate your content. I appreciate your perspective.
Hell
Do you
yeah.
want
This
to
is
pitch
awesome.
yourself quickly? You want to pitch yourself?
Fucking
Please.
Austin Jochum on anything. If you're interested, you're interested. If you're not, that's okay.
That's how you do that. That's how you get chicks right there. Start doing that. All right, buddy. Appreciate you a ton.
Fuck yeah. This is awesome, dude.
Take it easy.
Peace.